We live in a world in which fighting is a reality. We will fight over our collective identities, over race, over gender, over our economic status. We will fight over resources. That's a lot of the reasons why wars are fought. We will fight about loyalties and betrayals. That's why men and women fight and relationships end and have trouble. We will fight over household chores, as we will see a little bit later. No matter what it is, we can find some way to fight or argue about it. But fighting is not the way. It doesn't reflect the image of God in us. It's not the way of Jesus. And interestingly enough, it's not even necessary. Once you start to understand what peace is and how we can achieve peace, you begin to understand how fighting is totally unnecessary if we would all just make the right choice. But what is the solution to fighting? Well, it's summed up in the person of Jesus, of course. It's always our answer to all of life's problems is Jesus. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean that Jesus is the answer to the problem of fighting and our desire to fight? Well, we understand what Jesus has accomplished, and we make a choice to pursue peace with that understanding. You know, Paul said in Romans, we have peace with God because of what Jesus the Messiah, our Lord, has done for us. So we see firstly that Jesus has accomplished peace between us and God. That's important. We'll come back to that in a bit. But Paul also said in Ephesians, for the Messiah himself has brought us peace. Now all of us can come to the Father through the same Holy Spirit because of what Jesus has done for us. And so we can actually have peace between each other, between human beings, between people. We can have peace because of what Jesus has accomplished and what Jesus does for us. He brings us together in the sense that we all can have access to the same salvation that comes through him. But what is peace? What are we talking about when we're talking about fighting, or in a sense, the opposite state, peace? Well, biblically, when we're talking about the word peace, we're talking about the Hebrew word shalom. That's what the biblical writers would have either used in the Hebrew scriptures, of course, or apostles would have thought of the word shalom when they were writing in Greek, and they translated that word. We use the word peace, but that itself, in and of itself, doesn't really give us the meaning other than what we normally understand it to be, such as something like the absence of war or the absence of fighting. But it's, again, not until we go back to the more original biblical word of shalom that we understand what it truly means. Shalom refers to wholeness, completeness. I don't know, you can think of maybe a pie chart, and a full, complete pie chart, no pieces of the pie taken out. There's shalom when you have the whole thing. Or just think of anything, whether it's, I don't know, a car with all the different parts, or a computer, or many different things that require lots of different parts coming together. Maybe a sports team, lots of different people with different roles, or a business has a lot of different people with different roles. When all the pieces are in place and are working together in harmony, that's when you have shalom. That's when you have completeness, wholeness. Or, since I use that word harmony, think of music. When all of the pieces, all the notes are correctly working with one another, all the notes and the different instruments are in harmony with one another and all on the same page, so to speak, then you have shalom, you have wholeness, completeness. And so when you don't have shalom, when you don't have peace, something's missing. Something's missing, all right. And again, when we're talking about people, we're talking about how we work together, how we get along with each other, how our relationships are. When there isn't shalom, that means we're not working together. We're not working in harmony. The situation and our relationships are not whole. They're not complete because there's some part that is causing it to get out of whack, some part that is causing it to not work properly. So we're looking for shalom in the home. And I'm stealing that phrase from Rabbi Shmuley Buteach. We want shalom, we want wholeness in our home, not just physically. Obviously, we want our home itself to stay in place and be structurally secure and sound, but we're talking again about our relationships and how we get along with each other and our families. We want our families to have shalom, right? To have wholeness. And again, that only works when we make sure that each part is working together and we find a way to work together in that way. So how exactly do we get to peace? And or to use the title of this message, how do we increase our peace, right? How do we increase the cohesiveness of our relationships so that we are working together, working for one another and for the whole, rather than perhaps working for ourselves only or going off and doing whatever and it causes some kind of disharmony? Well, the interesting thing is, as we said, we have to understand what Jesus has done for us, what Jesus has accomplished to bring us peace between us and God, peace between us and one another. And then with that understanding in mind, we then work with one another to negotiate with one another, to get to the point where we are working with each other so that there is wholeness, so that if something does break, so to speak, in our relationship, that we can fix that part and come back together and be working properly. So let's just take a moment here to think about what Jesus has done for us to give us peace between us and God. In what way don't we have peace with God? Well, God is our creator. He is, as I mentioned earlier, he made us to bear and reflect his image, who he is. And when we fight with one another and when we go off and do things that are unrighteous and evil, we are no longer bearing and reflecting his image, and we in fact are causing a divide between us and him. And God is not the one who is causing the divide, it's we who are causing the divide. And in a sense, there is not the ability for us to enjoy relationship with one another, to learn from God and to grow in him and to be empowered by him and motivated by him if we are off doing our own thing. So we are not causing shalom between us and God when we go off and sin and when we go off and do things that are not good for us and are in fact evil or immoral. So what Jesus has done is be that perfect example for us, and on the cross he showed us that total humility and total willingness to submit to what is good and what is virtuous and righteous. That is the way to return and restore our relationship back to God. And so he accomplishes that perfect example for us and in fact made the way, paved the path forward for us to follow in his footsteps, so to speak. So we ourselves, and we looked at this last month, so we ourselves die with Jesus, metaphorically, spiritually, if you will, and but we also live with him. That is, we live in his resurrection power and we imitate his righteousness by choosing to do the right thing. Jesus is the one who, in a sense, helps us to get back into the right place to be able to have shalom with God, to be able to have peace with God. And as we make daily choices to continue to follow Jesus, that peace with God is sustained, if you will, and manifested in our lives. And how is it manifested in our lives? Well, primarily in how we get along with others, the people with whom we are in relationship. Paul said again, if I may read this again, that the Messiah himself brought peace to us. Because in the context, Paul's talking about Jews and Gentiles, and Gentiles were considered outsiders by the Jewish community. They were mostly idolaters and people who did not follow or believe in or had allegiance to the God of Israel and were off doing things that were immoral and all that sort of thing. They were outside of the scope of God's people, if you will, outside of the kingdom of God. But what Paul teaches here in Ephesians chapter 2 is that Jesus allows the two to come together and be one people by the Gentiles being brought near and into the commonwealth of Israel and having access to the covenants of promise and access to the salvation that God had accomplished through the Messiah Jesus. And so now all of us, Paul says, can come to God through the same Spirit because of what the Messiah has done for us. There's no longer any reason to exclude people. It's now a totally inclusive message that we can share with everyone, that we can all come together. We are all sinners. We are all in need of salvation. And we are all able to have that salvation because we now have access to God through the same Holy Spirit based upon what Jesus has done for us. And so Jesus, in that sense, gives us no excuse for there to be fighting among us, no excuse for there to be hostility between us, because, again, we are all in the same boat and God gives us the same grace. So again, Jesus has granted us, given us peace between us and God, peace between us and each other. And so now we have no excuse to continue to fight with one another, continue to wreck the shalom that we could have with one another. But what do? We have to make that choice. We have to understand what Jesus has accomplished for us, which we just looked at, and we have to then make a choice to speak to one another and to negotiate with one another in such a way where we can, as we're going to talk about, have win-win scenarios. That is to say, there is no scenario in which you lose and I win, or I lose and you win. Instead, we're working towards scenarios in which we're both satisfied. We're both working towards the good of the relationship to meet each other's needs and desires. So in fact, several years ago, we had a special turnaround event, that what we used to call those events. And I spoke about how we can peacefully negotiate with one another. And thankfully, our friends Dave and Joanne Gray were kind enough to be our examples. We're going to act out, so to speak, a scenario in which we can learn how to peacefully negotiate and negotiate towards peace. So I want to show us some examples. Dave and Joanne have graciously agreed to show us some examples of win-lose. Okay, so the first example is of a spouse. Your spouse has agreed to do the dishes, but they are not done long past the time you thought they would be. So the spouse who asked the other spouse to do the dishes says this.
Dave, are you ever going to do the dishes?
Or,
why haven't you done the dishes yet?
Or possibly this.
Do you not care how I feel when you don't do the dishes?
So the spouse will then say,
Okay, I'll do the dishes already.
Or how about in a parent-child relationship? Your child raises their voice in public, so the parent says,
I can't take you anywhere.
Or,
I'm so disappointed in you.
or he might say this.
Why can't you just do what I say when I tell you to talk softer?
So the child, in a lot of cases, might actually just not say anything. Will just cower, and will just simply, out of shame, say nothing and get the point that way, right? Remember, these were examples where a person wins. And there's one more example, actually. Sorry about that. There's one more example. There's the coworker. Your coworker doesn't do a task the way you want it done.
Dave, you never do anything the way I want you to.
Or you might say this.
You're going to get us in trouble with the boss.
Or you might say this.
How did you ever get hired?
So the coworker might say,
Fine, I'll do it your way.
Thank you. So these were examples where one person wins and the other person does comply. I chose to show you what's like when the other person does comply and meets the other person's need or desire, but not because they really wanted to or that they feel like they've won. In fact, their needs and desires have not been considered. So it's really just a win-lose. The person who asked the other person to meet their need won because they got what they wanted, but the other person's needs and desires have not been considered, so they've lost. But we don't want to have win-lose interactions in our relationships. Let's strive for something better. So because you've done the work of finding out each other's emotions and needs and desires, you then have a better chance of coming up with a win-win. So let's have Dave and Joanne come back. We're going to return to those three examples, and we're going to find a win-win solution. Okay, so in the first example, The husband had agreed to do the dishes, but they have not yet been done. So the first spouse says,
Dave, when I see that the dishes have not been done, I feel anxious and overwhelmed because I need consideration and order. Would you be willing to do the dishes now?
because the wife has not once in this whole interaction so far, because she has not judged her husband, the husband at this point doesn't feel threatened, he doesn't feel shamed, or anything negative like that. Instead, the wife has simply said, let's have Joanne say it again. She simply stated the observable fact, she expressed her emotions, her needs and desires, and then she made a request. Let's have you do it again.
When I see that the dishes have not been done, I feel anxious and overwhelmed because I need consideration and order. Would you be willing to do the dishes now?
So this allows the husband to then be empathetic. He actually feels for his wife. And because he's not threatened, he can then share his own feelings and needs and desires.
I haven't done the dishes yet because I'm feeling a little burned out and I need some rest and some space. How about it if I do some of the bigger dishes now so there's a little more order in the kitchen tonight, and I'll do the rest of them in the morning?
The wife can respond.
That sounds good to me. You're considering my needs, and there will be some order in the kitchen tonight, and even more tomorrow. Thank you.
So, we have found a win-win solution to their problem. That the wife had stated that she wanted order and a little bit of, how did we put it? She was feeling anxious and overwhelmed, and she wanted to be considered. She wanted her needs to be considered in this situation, and she wanted order in the kitchen. So she asked, "Can you do the dishes now?" But Dave was feeling a little burnt out, a little overwhelmed. So, and he needed rest and some space. He didn't want to be overwhelmed with doing that task. So, but he was willing. This is where you can become creative. He was willing to say, "You know what? I don't mind doing a few of the big dishes now, but I'll do the rest tomorrow morning." And then Joanne realized, "Hey, wait a second. That means that there will be a little bit of order. He's certainly considering my needs and desires. There will be a little bit of order tonight, and then they will all be taken care of tomorrow." And if they're both satisfied with that solution, then it's a win-win, right? Okay. And so you're going to find that you're going to come up with your own solutions, and you can be creative about it. But the second example is that the parent wanted their child to not be so loud while in public. The parent says,
When we're in public and you speak so that everyone around us hears, I feel uncomfortable and anxious because I need peace and cooperation. Would you be willing to speak so that only I can hear you when we're in public?
now I want to point something out. Notice that he said, when we're in public and you speak so that everyone around us hears. Because even saying something like, you're speaking loudly, is really just a judgment, right? Because loudness to one person is, like you come to our Italian house on a Sunday afternoon, it's pretty loud, but to us it's just normal. So even loudness and quietness is sort of a judgment call, right? We don't need to get too picky about all this stuff, all the terminology, but we do want to be mindful of judgmental language. So a good way of saying it, only stating that which is observable, is saying that when you speak so that everyone around us can hear, because that's a fact, everyone was hearing the child. And so say it again, go ahead and say your part again, David.
When we're in public and you speak so that everyone around us hears, I feel uncomfortable and anxious because I need peace and cooperation. Would you be willing to speak so that only I can hear you when we're in public?
So the child can respond.
Dad, when I speak so that everyone hears me, I feel excited and happy because I like to have fun and be paid attention to. But I can be quiet in public if you pay more attention to me and we have a little more fun when we go out.
The parent can respond.
Of course I can do that, honey. I didn't realize that's what you needed.
Now, I might have us go over that again so you can really get it. But of course, I do want to point out, depending upon the age of the child, you're probably going to want to use a little more kid-friendly language, and obviously the child is going to respond in a way a child would respond. So you're going to have to, actually this is part of parenting, is you're training your child to be able to speak and communicate in a way that is not aggressive but is peaceful. So the point of this example was to show you that the child wasn't really interested in being loud for the sake of being annoying or obnoxious. The child didn't want to be annoying or uncooperative. He just wanted more attention from his parent. She wanted more attention from her dad. And because she wanted more attention, specifically attention from the parent, the fact that the parent did not demand silence or judge the child allowed the child to eventually realize and express the real reason why they were being loud in public. It's because they wanted more attention from their parent. So let's have you go over that again to really get it, the whole thing.
When we're in public and you speak so that everyone around us hears, I feel uncomfortable and anxious because I need peace and cooperation. Would you be willing to speak so that only I can hear you when we're in public?
Dad, when I speak so that everyone hears me, I feel excited and happy because I like to have fun and be paid attention to. But I can be quiet in public if you pay more attention to me and we have a little more fun when we go out.
Of course I can do that, honey. I didn't realize that's what you needed.
So a win-win solution was found, because what kind of parent wouldn't, comply with the request to pay attention more to their kid and to have a little more fun? It's a perfectly reasonable solution, and it gets to the point that the kid doesn't want to be rebellious. No, but the child did have a need that wasn't being met, right? And the parent had a need too, so it's not a win-lose. We're not talking about the children owning their parents and walking all over their parents. We're talking about finding solutions where everyone is satisfied, so that everyone is considered and heard. That way, children can grow up thinking, I see this in the Fairbush kids a lot, children can grow up thinking that they're worthy and they're real people who are heard and considered. So I'm very grateful for the way Paul and Laura parent their kids, because you can just see the difference. But that allows for win-win solutions. And there's one more example. The co-worker, the person wanted their co-worker to do a task their way, but the co-worker did the task their own way.
Dave, when I see that you've done a task wrong, I feel frustrated and a little baffled because I need to be considered and be able to contribute. Would you be willing to try doing it this way?
I did the task that way because our boss told me to do it that way. But I was aware of your ideas too, so I felt tense and conflicted. Because I have a need for peace and inclusion, would you be okay with presenting your ideas to our boss first? If he approved, then I'll gladly do it your way.
Which then allows the coworker to say this.
Thank you for clarifying that you are not intentionally ignoring me. I will definitely go to the boss first with my ideas. Thank you.
The second coworker wasn't trying to be rude or inconsiderate when they did things as the first person perceived it to be their way and not the other person's way. But it really just was the fact that the boss had said something. So this person had failed to mention that the boss had instructed him already to do it a specific way. But by speaking to each other this way, they eventually got to the truth. That it wasn't the one coworker trying to ignore or offend the other coworker. It was just that he felt obligated to do things the boss's way. But he also wanted to include the coworker too. So the solution was, I'll do it your way, but you have to sort of clear it with the boss first. And that, as a reasonable person, would say, well, I guess you shouldn't be doing things the boss isn't telling us to do, so I'll go to the boss first. So you can have a win-win solution. All right, let's give a round of applause to Dave and Joanne. Thank you. So you see, we can have win-win scenarios. We can meet each other's needs and desires without losing ourselves, with the other person working towards meeting our needs and desires. And that really reflects the shalom and the peace that we have with God, because God always comes through for us and is always there for us. And we make a choice to submit ourselves to him and to live for him. And so that then is reflected, that peace that Jesus has secured for us between us and God is then reflected in our own relationships. And we make a choice to again, negotiate and to figure out how we can have shalom between one another. And so with that in mind, we really want to commemorate and celebrate the peace that Jesus has accomplished for us and gives us, the peace that he has given us. As Jesus said, peace I give to you, not like the world gives to you, but it's this special kind of peace that truly gives us the ability to, no matter what's going on, to understand there is peace between us and God and peace between one another if we, again, make that choice each day. And so, again, we're going to celebrate this by taking the elements of the bread and the cup and engage in what is called communion, which is a commemoration of Jesus' last meal that he shared with his disciples. They engaged in a sort of a Passover meal, and they ate the Passover lamb, and they took the bread and they took the cup, and Jesus infused them with additional and new meaning. And we take those elements and we remember Jesus and what he's done for us through those elements. So we're going to partake together. We always start our time of communion with this verse in 1 Corinthians 11:26. Paul said, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." So, in fact, we are, again, memorializing, and we are, in a sense, proclaiming Jesus and what he has accomplished for us by engaging in the partaking of the bread and the cup and talking about its significance. However, this is not something that we do flippantly. We don't do it in such a way where we just get through it. We take the time to really analyze what, again, the significance of what we're doing, but also to look inside of ourselves to say, are we really measuring up? Are we really fully committed to Jesus? And if not, can we make that commitment again? So that's why Paul said, you should examine yourself before eating the bread and drinking the cup. It's important that we say, again, are we truly committed to Jesus? Are we truly endeavoring to live for him and to manifest the peace that he has accomplished for us? And are we truly doing that with one another? Living to pursue peace and to negotiate with one another. And if there is something between us and someone else, we might not have the ability to fix it or to resolve it this second, but we can in our hearts say right now, it's my heart's desire to make sure that there is peace in my life and peace in my relationships. So if you have that right attitude, and if you are someone who has been baptized and is a committed follower of Jesus, then I encourage you to partake of the bread and the cup as we continue. And in fact, Jesus took the bread, the unleavened bread, the matzah bread of the Passover meal, and he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And so we can actually take this bread, remember Jesus and what he's done for us, the example he set for us, and we can pray these prayers here and eat the bread and renew our commitment to him. We can pray this together. We thank you, our Father, for the life and the knowledge that you made known to us through your servant Jesus. Yours is the glory forever. Just as this piece of bread was once scattered over the mountains and then gathered together, so may your church be gathered from the ends of the earth in your kingdom. For yours is the glory and the power through Jesus forever. And we say the blessing. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Let us eat the bread together. And again, the meal continued, and in fact, after the main meal of the Passover lamb, Jesus took a third cup for the night that they would drink from, and it was a cup of wine, a cup of the fruit of the vine, grape juice, if you will. That itself is representative of joy and the goodness of God, and that particular cup is the cup that commemorated the redemption that God performed and did and gave to his people coming out of the land of Egypt with the Exodus. And so it's perfect that Jesus took that cup and said, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. And so he was saying that through the cup we would be able to memorialize what Jesus has accomplished through his death, that which secures the new covenant, which allows us to again have that peace between us and God. And in fact, one day that peace will spread throughout the entire world in the kingdom of God. And so we drink the cup to memorialize that, and we say this prayer together. We thank you, our Father, for the holy vine of your servant David. Yours is the glory forever. And the blessing. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. Let's drink together. In fact, I declare to you l'chaim, which means to life. We drink to life, and we declare that God's life, we declare and ask and pray that God's life would be in us, and in fact, that peace that we have with him now because of Jesus would be manifested in our relationships and in our lives. And again, with the hope that one day that peace will manifest in our world. In fact, as we manifest that peace with one another, that peace will become contagious and it will, in fact, spread throughout the rest of the world. And we're so grateful to God for his faithfulness to us. So let's sing the song together. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week for our church service. We're so grateful that you can join us and watch us this way and that we can still be in touch with you. Again, visit our website and stay in touch with us on social media throughout the week. And no matter what, don't forget that we have this wonderful gift of God's peace that comes to us through what Jesus has accomplished and what Jesus has shown us. So don't forget to increase your peace this week and to make a choice to peacefully negotiate with others and to see your relationships thrive as a result. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Pastor Daniel for Glad Tidings Church of God. Have a great week. God bless.